This is a regular meeting of the Urbana Community Development Commission for July 2016. And we do have an agenda, and I now call the meeting to order. And first on our, next on our agenda is roll call. Did you go ahead with the roll call?
Yes.
Okay.
Fred Cobb,
Here?
Janice Bankston, Brian Cunningham, Chris Diana,
Here.
Ann Hines Silvis, Lauren Carplus,
Here.
Jerry Moreland.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, next is approval or modification of the minutes from our last meeting. So I'll allow a couple of minutes for us to review those minutes, after which I'll entertain motions for approval or modifications. Okay, does anyone need more time? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval or corrections.
I move to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes as written. Is there a second? Second. A motion and a second to approve the minutes as written. Any conversation? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the minutes stand approved as written. Okay, next we have what's called petitions and communications. That's if we have any written correspondence that we would like to review at this time.
No, we don't.
Okay. Next, audience participation. Anyone in the audience out there have anything for us? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead with staff report.
Okay. I'll just go through and highlight some of the things that have stood out. We have, from HUD, we have received emails or letters regarding grants. In particular, we received an email regarding the supportive housing program, funding allocation, and there was a cut because they are looking to change their priorities. So transitional housing is not considered a priority per se, more about housing first approach and other approaches. So that, and then we also received an email regarding our CDBG and our home grant agreement, and so we have worked on getting signatures and returning that to HUD. And then we also received a letter regarding our 1 month progress toward our commitment deadline, which we are definitely working on and will be about done. So that's great. Then of course you can see different things of monitoring subrecipients. We're continuing to do that. Working on closing out last fiscal year and working on this fiscal year, getting things set up. You can see here the housing rehab coordinator, the different rehab projects that Randy's doing. And then, of course, our activities as far as the different meetings that we attend. So that's it. If you have any questions, let me know.
Can I just ask about the funding for the supportive housing program, 53% cut? Can you just remind me of the numbers of what that'll affect?
Sure.
And the amounts and how you're planning around that cut?
Sure. That is the supportive housing program, is the homeless families in transition that we administer for Courage Connection. Two of their programs, the Evans Forbes House and the domestic violence. So the amount that was requested, and it's usually what they have been given for the last several years, was about $166,000. And it was cut to about $89,000-ish dollars. So basically what was cut was the supportive services amount. The operations stayed the same. And of course I meant the administration went down because it's based on the amount. And again, it's based on the priorities that HUD has set. So, but one of the things that we're looking, because we now have received notice that the funding availability application is now come out for the next grant already. I think it's due in September or October, and then we'll find out in the winter. We're already looking at realigning, because they do have domestic violence as a priority. So we're looking at shifting probably the funds to that particular program so that it will, and then they have a lot of other different grants that they could probably cover with the other facilities that they have. So that's what they'll do, is because overall Continuum of Care wants to make sure that, because if it doesn't match a priority that HUD has, then there's a good chance there will be a cut or no funding. So yet they still want to make sure that it's a local priority as well. So so that's what Dune is looking at, shifting so that the domestic violence will still be covered, and maybe even possibly add the name or change the name. We're still exploring that. We have time before the actual application is due and has to be submitted.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much. And
You're welcome.
we'll move on to old business. And under old business, we have an ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate, which is 401 to 403 East Kerr Avenue. Okay. Would someone like to elaborate?
That will be Matt.
Sure.
Okay.
So 401 and 403 East Kerr Avenue are, of course, the parcels on which the Highland Green development is intended to be situated. And the parcels are currently city-owned property, and the city has owned them for some time with the expectation that it would be used for affordable housing. And now that the developer is getting into the final stages of preparing their finances and getting closer to closing on committing to the development, the time has come to actually transfer the property to the development team so that they can begin construction as soon as possible. And in accordance with Section 2-118 of the Urbana City Code, public hearing is required for the sale of any real estate, so there will be a public hearing on this sale at the August 1st council meeting in the council chambers at 7 o'clock. And of course, the council is looking for a recommendation from the Community Development Commission on this proposed ordinance. And this is a critical part of the development, is making sure that the developer has the property and is able to begin construction. So the options before the Community Development Commission are to approve or recommend approval of the ordinance to the Urbana City Council, recommend approval of the ordinance with modifications, or to not recommend approval of the ordinance. And staff recommends that the Community Development Commission forward the ordinance authorizing the sale of 401 and 403 East Kerr Avenue to the Urbana City Council with a recommendation for approval. Are there any questions? I do want to also point out that Aaron Smith is in the audience and is the executive director of the Homestead Corporation of Champaign-Urbana, and Aaron is, I'm sure, would be able to answer any questions you have of the developer from their end.
Okay. Anyone have questions? I was just wondering, go ahead. Okay, we talked about previously about the need, allocating additional funds for the development. I was wondering if any issues have come up requiring any more funds or any other obstacles that were not foreseen since we last met.
We have not been, there have been no requests made of us for additional funding. We are aware that construction costs and other costs are certainly rising for the developer. So we would certainly at least entertain other requests for funding if those were made. But at the moment, the home commitment has helped us to meet our commitment deadline through what was brought to the previous Community Development Commission. That agreement has been signed and committed almost $300,000 to the project, and we're still planning to commit $500,000 total, the balance of that being from the Community Development Block Grant.
Okay.
But at this time, we're not aware of any additional
Yeah,
requests have
issues.
not been made or
Yep.
any issues, so.
Okay. Go ahead.
I had a question about the real estate transfer agreement. On page 3 of 5, number 11, for the construction schedule. I'm just want to make sure I understand the construction schedule. I just moved into the neighborhood, so that's part of my curiosity. But as well as where it says, buyer agrees to construct the project on the subject property on or before July 5th, 2017, or on or before a date established in any modification of this agreement. So can you just give us a timeline, maybe from the developer perspective, on what the construction timeline is going to look like?
I believe currently our construction timeline would have us finishing up in the spring, early summer of next year, but we would probably have units coming on in a staggered fashion where we'd complete a set and then have them occupied while we're finishing the rest of the units as we go through.
So really, you're looking at a quick construction period?
Yeah, I mean, we hope to get started as soon as possible so that we can take advantage of the sort of the tail end of the construction season and get as much enclosed as we can before the winter.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anyone else? If not, as mentioned, we can approve the ordinance and forward this, well, we can forward it to City Council with a recommendation for approval, non-approval, or modifications. With that, I'll entertain a motion from the commission as to how to proceed. Would someone,
I'd move that we forward the ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate, 401, 403 East Kerr Avenue, to the Urbana City Council with the recommendation for approval.
is there a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to forward the ordinance for the sale of the real estate to the City Council with the recommendation for approval. Any comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Okay. Next, that concludes the old business. Now we'll move into new business. First under new business is resolution approving home loan documents between the Urbana Home Consortium and Highland Green LLC. Would someone elaborate?
Sure. And since this kind of goes hand in hand with the following resolution regarding
Okay.
CDBG infrastructure agreement, I'll present about both. But starting off with the home loan documents, at the previous Community Development Commission, we introduced a home developer agreement that has recently been executed between the Urbana Home Consortium and Highland Green LLC. And as I mentioned before, that committed $291,580 to the project. And that was done in advance of the developer's financial closing to meet our home commitment deadline. And that was a very critical component of meeting the commitment deadline. And now that that has helped us to, I guess, suit our needs, we also want to bring forward loan documents that would require approval of the city council to transfer the home funds to the developer in the form of a loan, which is a requirement of developers using low-income housing tax credits. And the three documents that will need to be implemented to ensure that it takes the form of a loan is a home land use restriction, which ensures that the developer obeys the rules associated with the home program and that those rules are tied to the land. Also a promissory note and a mortgage, which are standard legal documents that go along with conveying funds tied to property. Shifting into the CDBG infrastructure agreement, we had intended to take the home and CDBG funds at the same time, but because of the home commitment deadline, we wanted to move that one up a little bit more quickly. But now, included in this packet is several draft CDBG documents. We have not committed the CDBG funds to the project yet formally, but these documents, when executed, will do that. And they include the CDBG infrastructure agreement, which will formally commit us to providing CDBG funds to the project, and the mortgage and promissory note, which will tie the funds to the property and convey them to the developer in the way that they need it to be done from a legal perspective. So these documents are required to be sure that the funds do reach the developer and that the home funds are used for the new construction and the CDBG funds are used for necessary infrastructure that will be constructed at the site. And as I mentioned before, the developer is looking to financially close in August, so that's when we hope to bring these documents before them for final approval. So the Community Development Commission has the options to recommend approval of the two resolutions for the home documents and CDBG documents, recommend approval with modifications, or recommend disapproval. Are there any questions?
No. I have a question. Has anyone expressed any opposition to this action? Or have any concerns?
Not to this specific action, as far as I'm aware.
Mhm.
Nobody's come to council and said anything. Nobody has called or emailed. Council is behind this project.
Mhm.
I know at one of the meetings, Chris Block with Brinshaw came and had big posters of what the development would look like, and I know that council was excited by it. So so far, we haven't heard any opposition to this project.
Okay. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve these two items and forward it to City Council with our approval. Is there a motion?
If I may, just
Yeah.
one question first, Fred.
Okay.
Just want to make sure on this, on what we just approved with regard to the transfer of the land, and you said that it had to have a public hearing, which will be on August 1st, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Is there any required waiting time after that public hearing, or is it just a single public hearing? Is that all that's required for that?
I believe it's just a single public hearing, and the actual sale of the transfer of the property can take place at any point following that, or the approval of council can take place following that.
Right.
But we could certainly look into that.
I was just wondering, I mean, not foreseeing that, but let's say that there was, the public hearing being a public hearing, if there was some question or some objection, what's the process that needs to be gone through after that? Would be kind of my question.
Yeah,
Since
we-
obviously this is a daisy chain, these documents have no legal bearing whatsoever unless the land has already been transferred before we do these. So that was
Right.
just I should have asked that actually when we were in the
Sure.
previous one. I guess it hadn't occurred to me then, but just kind of curious what the process is if there actually is any question at public hearing.
That's a good
Then what
point.
happens to our timeline?
Yeah, well, since it's city code and not like HUD regulations, I'm not real familiar with the city code, but we'll definitely check and see what the process is. And of course, if someone comes in and has questions, we would certainly look into addressing those concerns for sure before we would, sign anything.
If there's any delay caused by that, does that impact the timeline of this whole process or the deadlines that we've got to hit for anything? Or
Not our HUD deadlines directly. The home commitment deadline on July 31st was, I guess, our most impending deadline.
Right.
There are deadlines associated with CDBG, but I don't know that any of them are coming up in the immediate future. That
Okay.
a delay of a couple of weeks or months even would
Would impact?
impede.
Okay.
Yeah, the CDBG is not until like next May.
Okay.
So, of course, we would want to make sure to work with the developer that we wouldn't impede any of like their
Right.
timelines too.
Right.
So,
Okay, thank you.
One last question. Who will be monitoring if all of these requirements are followed accurately?
That will be the grants management division.
Vision, yes, all of us.
Yes.
Me and Matt and Randy,
Mm-hmm.
probably Don even, different parts of it will all be,
Okay.
going on site as well, and because there's a lot of different regulations that we have to make sure, the Section 3 and Davis-Bacon and labor standards and all that, so we'll be doing all that.
Okay. All right, let's shift over to the motion portion. Would someone like to make a motion to approve these actions?
I move to approve the two resolutions in front of us. One approving the home loan documents, and the second approving the CDBG infrastructure agreement.
Okay, to approve them with, and
As
recommend them to city council, have a recommendation
Yeah.
from the commission for approval.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
And second.
Okay, any questions, comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Okay, next, a resolution amending an emergency solution grant subrecipient agreement, in parentheses, Rosecrans Time Center, fiscal year 2015-16. Explanation?
So this resolution is, again, similar to one that was brought before CDC not too long ago related to home tenant-based rental assistance. when Community Elements transitioned over to Rosecrans, our agreements were still made with Community Elements, and legally it becomes difficult to transfer funds to formerly Community Elements, now Rosecrans, because they are a different entity at this point. So the resolution here is for an amendment to the Emergency Solutions Grant Subrecipient Agreement for fiscal year 15-16. And we're working on trying to make sure that the 16-17 agreement is also made with the correct entity so that we can just go right into that one. That one doesn't require any amending when that goes forward. But the 15-16 one, there's one payment that we need to make to Rosecrans, and in order to do that, we're currently working with the legal division on how to properly craft this amendment, and we're in the process of that, but we will need approval through council to change that amendment to allow our funds to flow back into Rosecrans, formerly Community Elements. And the Emergency Solutions Grant that was funded through the original agreement is for the Times Center, Community Elements Rosecrans Times Center, which is a shelter for men, and it is, the way I understand it, is going through some changes right now, but this agreement is for reimbursed expenses that Rosecrans has already incurred. So it will allow them to recoup those expenses that they've made to the time shelter, which is an important resource in our community. So with that in mind, the options before the Community Development Commission are to recommend approval of the resolution, recommend approval of the resolution with modifications, and recommend disapproval of the resolution. Are there any questions?
I think not.
My only question would be, I'm assuming that this actually is an assignable agreement. I don't recall ever really seeing that in any of those agreements.
That's
That
we're
a clause about that?
we're working on that with the legal division and making sure that the agreement is assignable,
Right.
and assuming that it is, that it's assigned to the proper entity. One of the questions that the city attorney has asked us, and that we have in turn asked Community Elements, or will ask Community Elements, is, perhaps the funding from this agreement, if Community Elements still exists in some legal and as some entity right now, maybe they still should receive the reimbursement from this. We're still trying to figure that out. But assuming, yes, that the agreement can be assigned, and that it should be assigned to Rosecrans, that's what we are anticipating going forward with.
Right, yeah, because it's, obviously they're working on that, but yeah, otherwise it would seem somewhat impossible. The assigning party has to be the party that no longer exists. So it's not functioning as a unit. It doesn't have the ability to assign something to someone else, one would normally think, so I can see that being kind of a quandary to be in.
Yeah.
If they really aren't there anymore.
Right, yeah, they completely merged. And so,
Right.
yeah, actually, we're going to be having a meeting with them about this merger. We were at a press release, but we're
Right.
actually gonna meet with them to discuss more about this merger and all the different programs that they have and the affecting.
Yeah, you'd think this should have been part of their due diligence for their merger to figure
Right.
out whether this was possible to do and get it done
Right.
before the fact rather than after.
Right. I did check with Illinois DHS, who is the gets the funding from HUD that we then apply for ESG, and asked them about what kind of agreement did they need because there was this merger. And in their opinion, just having the agreement say Rosecrans, formerly known as Community Elements, was good enough for them. So, so that's what we're going to probably with this coming years, when we bring them to you next month, is probably what we'll have, how they have the agreements. And we'll check with legal to make sure, but that was what DHS said would work for them, to say that it's Rosecrans, formerly known as Community Elements.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is this similar to when contractors sort of go out of business and resurface with a different name? Will the same people be involved in running this that were previously involved in running the
Yes.
earlier
Kind of
entities?
yes and no. I mean, they do have, at the press release, they talked about it actually completely merging and taking over. So now Community Elements will be Rosecrans, Champaign-Urbana.
Different people?
Sheila Ferguson will still be like, she'll have a different title, I think. She's not the CEO for Community Elements. She now has a different title, but she's, I think, in charge of this facility, because Rosecrans is actually based in Rockford, so they have other facilities around the state, and so this is part
Okay.
of their network of different facilities.
Okay.
So
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to forward the resolution to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
I move we forward the resolution amending an emergency solutions grant subrecipient agreement to the Urbana City Council with a recommendation for approval.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval to the City Council of this amending resolution. Any comments, questions? If not,
Yeah, I guess
Go ahead.
I'll just reiterate, I understand they're working on it, but this was the section I was looking for before and couldn't find. Section 11 on page 5, which specifically talks about sub-grants transferring, conveying of any of its rights, duties, or obligations without prior approval, automatically voids the contract and puts it up for rebid. So I would think we'd have to really watch that clause, you know, is changing your name might be okay. But if there's any two different entities that became some other, that would sound like a transfer of that portion of the contract, which I would think would kick that section in, yeah.
we can also look at, a few years ago, it happened similarly when Center for Women in Transition
Right.
merged with a women's fund to become the umbrella over, and they were Center for Women in Transition, and then they changed their name, of course, to Courage Connection.
Right.
So we can certainly look at how that was done as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because that also happened, like, because this merger occurred like on July 1st, or June or July 1st, July 1st. So that happened the same with the merger with CWIT and a Woman's Place or Women's Fund happened on July 1st that
Right.
year. So we can certainly review and make sure that we follow what occurred with that, because it was basically the same thing, a
Right,
merger
and
of
if
two.
that one already passed review at some point in the process, then, yeah, I guess if we did it exactly the same way,
Yeah.
we should be good. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that we do that.
okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Okay, next, we have Consolidated Social Service Funding Pool, CDBG, subrecipient agreements for fiscal year 2016-17.
I will take this since Matt has done a lot of talking with the other memos.
Okay.
I will do this. These are agreements that we have with two agencies that had applied for the social service funding, and that we looked at to make sure that they fit the priorities that the commission had chosen back in March. So, and that's these two agencies, these programs in particular, fit those priorities. As you can see on page 2, at the 22nd March meeting, the commission had selected seniors and/or youth, homelessness, and special needs population. And as you can see in the middle of the page, the Regional Planning Commission, the Youth Assessment Center, it hits the youth priority. And then the persons assuming control of their environment, PACE, the Personal Assistance Program, hits the priority for homelessness and the special needs population. And as part of the social service funding, we do monitor the funds through CDBG as well as the city-funded programs. So as you can see, both of these agencies receive city and CDBG, and we will be making sure to monitor both of those. And we are required to do these agreements per HUD. So so we have the different options here to forward the resolutions approving the agreements with Regional Planning Commission and PACE with a recommendation for approval. As you can see, there's no impact to the city budget because the $5,000 was in our for our social service funding was included in our annual action plan, and also it does not impact our CDBG budget because it was already planned in our annual action plan. So it won't affect either of the budgets, and it's also again combined with the social service funding amount from the city general fund. So if you have any questions, let me know. We do recommend that the commission forward the resolutions approving these grant agreements to the city council with a recommendation for approval.
Any questions, comments? I'll entertain a motion for approval or modifications.
I move to forward, or no, this isn't forwarding to city council this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is. Okay. I move to forward the resolution on to city council for approval as written.
Okay. We have a motion to forward this subrecipient agreement to the city council with a recommendation for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any comments, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Okay. Well, that exhausts our agenda for the evening. Is there anything that any commissioner would like to bring forward at this point? Search back in our history? If not, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Okay.